Welcome to Kindred, hosted by me, Kate, and my sister, Jen. In this podcast, we explore our human relationship to the natural world. In connecting to this planet, we also connect to understanding, compassion, and empathy. How can we see ourselves as not separate or above animals in nature, but a critical and integrated part of an active ecosystem? Through conversations with animal advocates, scientists, conservationists, and many others, we look to inspire a new awareness of how and why we connect to animals in nature in order to repair and restore our relationship to the natural world. Hello and welcome back to Kindred. Hello, sister. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, good. Excited for this episode. It's one of my favorite subjects. Do you want to know what it's going to be about?
I do.
All right, great. So we'll just jump right in because I'm pretty excited. You'll remember, Jennifer, not long ago, we interviewed the lovely Cy Montgomery in episode 37, right?
I do remember that. Yes. A great interview.
Yeah. And in that conversation, we talked about her research and books all about turtles and do you remember what else?
Octopi.
Well,
Which
yes.
is what I thought you were supposed to say. Yeah.
Well, yes. We did. And now that you've brought up a sore subject, let me just switch gears a little bit because I would like to break down your octopi plural. And because I know that throughout this episode, when you and I say octopuses, people are going to be like, nope, she's dumb and wrong. And I'm going to be like, hold on. I looked up the master herself, Merriam-Webster, and I would just like to read a little definition of this if you have the time, Jenny.
I do.
So, what to know? It says the three plurals of octopus come from the different ways the English language adopts plurals. Octopi is the oldest plural of octopus, coming from the belief that words of Latin origin should have Latin endings. Octopuses was the next plural, giving the word an English ending to match its adoption as an English word. And lastly, ready for this one? Octopodes stemmed from the belief that because octopus is originally Greek, it should have a Greek ending. So I'm going to say, you pick the word you would like, and we will absolutely carry on with that. I'm going with octopuses.
Well, and since Dr. Scheel, I believe, said octopuses, and he's the expert, I think I would defer to that.
He is, and you just told everyone who we're talking to, which is
whoops,
exciting. No, let's do it. But I'm just going to say, yes, we are talking to Dr. David Scheel. Before we get to that, though, my PSA, as normal, I'd like to talk about subscriptions to Kindred Podcast. If you're not sure about subscribing, we do offer a free week, so please check that out. And I would definitely take advantage of that and the Buy Me a Cup of Coffee, or otherwise known as Buy Me a Coffee. And please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Kindred Pod. So thank you all to our supporters and our subscribers and people who are buying us coffee. I'm a tea drinker, but I'll still take coffee, and so will you. So thanks so much, because you're a coffee girl. All right, so yes, we were so inspired to know more about the exceptional and unique animal that is the octopus. We have invited Dr. David Scheel, someone who has spent their life work researching and diving around the world in search of octopuses. So, let me just give you a little bit of background. Dr. Scheel is a behavioral ecologist and professor of marine biology at Alaska Pacific University in Anchorage, Alaska. We'll be asking him all about things octopuses, and we'll also be talking to him about his new book, Many Things Under a Rock, The Mysteries of the Octopus. And fun side note, one of the reviews written in this book was by none other than, can you guess?
Cy Montgomery.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. So very cool, small world, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's just really cool. I thought that was fun. And I didn't know that until I actually had gotten his book and read it.
It's fun.
So as exotic as octopuses are, I find them very relatable, especially after reading Dr. Scheel's book. But throughout history, humans have almost kind of demonized them, and I feel like missing so much of what makes them intriguing. Their intelligence, incredible sensory abilities, their physiology, and what I find the most interesting thing about them is actually their daily behavior.
Mhm.
I mean, at least as much as scientists like David have observed, right? So there's just so much more to learn that he talks about too. So let's head over to our conversation with Dr. David Scheel and glimpse into the mysterious lives of octopuses, or
Let's do it.
or octopodes,
Octopodes.
octopodes, if you're real fancy and Greek. All right, see you all at the takeaway.
Hi.
David, welcome to Kindred, and thanks so much for joining us today. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
Hi, Kate. Thanks for bringing me here. I'm David Scheel. I am a professor of marine biology at Alaska Pacific University in Anchorage, Alaska. And I guess you want that I study octopuses, which is one of many things I do. But yes, I'm primarily a behavioral ecologist, so I'm interested in behavior and how it interfaces with the rest of the animal's life.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, thanks so much. And again, welcome. And also congratulations on your book titled Many Things Under a Rock, The Mysteries of Octopuses. And if I'm not mistaken, illustrated by your daughter, Laurel Scheel?
That's right. My daughter Laurel is a wonderful artist, and she also has quite an eye for octopus pose and action, and so it was just a natural to have her illustrate the book. And some of your listeners might know her if they have seen the PBS documentary Octopus Making Contact, or overseas the BBC documentary The Octopus in My House. And Laurel steals the show there from me, deservedly. And then Heidi the octopus steals the show from Laurel. So it's just, it works out well.
Absolutely. And speaking of the shows and octopuses and how they're featured, octopuses are deeply rooted in the experience and psyche of humans, and poets write of them and legend is built on them. They're featured in PBS and children's stories and movies, and echo throughout accounts of seafaring men and times gone by, and of course embedded in the stories told by native communities as old as stories themselves are. They are legendary. But we'll get to some lore and legend a bit later. So what is it about octopuses that makes a scientist like you go from studying lions and wild dogs out on the Serengeti to marine biology and traveling around the world researching octopuses?
Well, I made the transition to marine biology because at the time, my thesis professor was still studying lions in Serengeti, and so being an expert in lions in Serengeti, that post was already filled. But my graduate work was really as a predator-prey ecologist and looking at the dynamics of the interactions between predators and their prey, and so that translates very well into the marine environment, and octopuses are predators,
right?
And so I was able to, weirdly enough, use many of the same kinds of ways of thinking about investigating what predators do on octopuses as I had used in the Serengeti.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes total sense, actually.
Yeah.
So part of what is so fascinating about octopuses is truly how they look. Introduce us to the octopus and tell us about the morphology and physiology of an octopus.
Yeah, well, I think we notice the eyes first. They're in the center of the body, but up at the top. And the eyes are we read them as very expressive. And they're located at the top of the head. And underneath them, facing downward, is the mouth. And surrounding the mouth is the second thing we notice, which is these arms with suckers all along their lengths, 8 arms. And those are, because they surround the mouth like that, they're in a way they're like prehensile lips. They're part of the mouth. We think of them as arms, but in some ways they're also simultaneously part of the mouth.
Interesting.
And so you've got 8 arms surrounding the mouth, suckers all over those, and then behind the head is the mantle, and that's a word that anatomically in the mollusks, in this group of animals, it describes a particular body part, but it's the muscular bag or sac that contains all the body's organs. Right. And so they've kind of got their gut, if you will, and their gonads and all that behind the head, and then the head with the eyes on top, and then the arms surrounding the mouth. And then the other really notable thing about the octopuses is just their skin, which is very changeable. It can change color and darkness and texture, and so it's very dynamic part of their body as well.
Right, absolutely, super dynamic. So then in their head, some of their brain is in there, and is their esophagus in there. I mean, it seems like a lot of parts are held in what I consider their head.
Yeah, the esophagus leads from the mouth, but it has to go to the stomach, which is behind the head, so it ends up going through the head. And unlike our arrangement where the esophagus, the mouth is located in the front of the head and the esophagus is going to go down to the gut, their arrangement is that the esophagus has to go through the head and come out the other side. And so the esophagus actually goes through the center of the brain.
Right.
Which is an unusual arrangement from our perspective. I did read about one octopus that was found that had tried to eat a sea urchin, and one of the spines had perforated the esophagus and gone into the brain.
Oh,
wow!
It has to have been a difficult injury to cope with. But I didn't hear how it was faring. But it sounded awful.
That sounds awful to me, that I'm swallowing and then something sticks in my brain. That would be very inconvenient for me, for sure. I mean,
do they swallow horizontally then? Or is it more upward?
Well, it's got to go so the mouth faces down. They're bottom feeders. Right. They're feeding at something in the center of the arm crown, and then the esophagus goes up, and then kind of takes a bend to go back into the gut.
Sorry, I don't understand how you would swallow up.
Well, that's because this is welcome to talking about the octopus, right?
Right. A lot of your swallowing has to do with muscular contractions in your esophagus.
True.
It's not just gravity.
Not gravity. Okay, fair. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I'm getting a science lesson as well as okay, sorry. that really threw my brain for a second.
Biology is weird.
Exactly. And so are octopuses. This is why we're talking about them. So these are all I really think there are no dumb questions with an octopus. I truly believe.
Well, sorry to interrupt you. That was just a burning question. So go ahead, Kate.
And then they have a beak, right? That you call a beak on their quote unquote mouth.
Yeah, it's like a parrot's beak, kind of the same sort of material and roughly the same shape as well. But it's much more embedded in the muscle of the mouth than a parrot's beak. So it's really not visible from outside of the animal unless they're very angry and trying to bite something.
Right.
Generally, they bring things to the mouth, and then the beak applies to the food that way, rather than the beak reaching out and grabbing things like you can kind of see a parrot do.
Exactly. And I think that's one of the sort of really fascinating things in like this juxtaposition of the octopus where they're this squishy, soft body, but then they have this hard beak, and what they end up
They can
eating.
bite you. Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get into this a little bit later, but they end up eating like hard shelled crabs and things like that. It's amazing. And then, so talk to us a little about their suckers, because I feel like, and in reading your book and other journals, it's like they interpret a lot with their suckers. Is that correct?
Yeah, their suckers are interesting organs because they do so many different things. Obviously, they're called suckers. They adhere to things, they sucker on. And the octopus has quite a bit of control over that. And then around the rim of the sucker cup, a lot of their sensory cells are located in that rim. So there's a very high density of cells that have sensory capabilities in the rims of the suckers. And they're mostly touch receptors and chemical receptors, chemoreceptors. And so in humans, we think of our chemical senses as a sense of smell and a sense of taste.
Right.
And they have suckers that they have sensory cells in their suckers that can taste chemicals in the water, which is a bit like our sense of smell, sort of.
Right.
But they also have sensors that are unique to the cephalopods, as far as we know, that specifically taste things that don't dissolve in water, but that are on contact with them. So they're tasting the chemicals that are sort of hydrophobic on the surfaces that they crawl across. So they have sensors that are somewhat akin to our taste buds and somewhat akin to our sense of smell, but also a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I've read a little bit about how there's a lot of it seems like people are talking about, like, is part of their brain even in their arms, right? Like that sensory capability is so acute and so highly evolved.
Yeah, there's this sort of narrative in the media about octopuses having every arm having its own brain, as it were. And I think it's a little misleading to think about it that way, but like so much that gets translated out of scientific circles into the popular media, there's a core truth in there. So what's going on is human being like us, we have, I forget the exact percentage, 95% or more of our nerve cells, the nerve tissue that we have, it's in our brain, it's in our heads.
Right.
And very little of it is distributed out around the rest of the body. Like most of the rest is going to be in the spinal cord, right?
Yeah.
But for an octopus, they only have about a third of their neurons in their brain. That's a big difference. So where are the rest of the neurons? Well, every arm has a cord that runs down the center of the arm.
Oh,
That's
wow.
a little bit like our spinal cord, except instead of having one of them, they have 8 of them.
Wow.
Interesting.
And then every sucker has a cluster of nerves, a ganglia, at the base, and every pair of suckers come together and communicate nervously through another ganglia. So there's just a lot of nerve processing power out in the arms. And then there's a thing called a commissary, a ring that connects at the base of the arms, that connects all of the input from the arms. And a lot of the neural calculations and the nervous signals that are being passed around, they never make it to the brain. They get sort of resolved on the way or part way there. And so a lot of the basic mechanics of octopus movement are controlled locally in the sucker, at the base of the suckers, or in the arms. And so, an octopus arm can pretty much do a complete reaching action that looks very much like it would in a live animal, even if the octopus arm is no longer attached to the body.
Right.
And so we get this notion that, well, if they're capable of doing complicated things without the body, are they capable of having their own opinions that sort of differ from the bodies?
Right.
But it's kind of a big stretch to,
yeah.
Well,
and then there's something called autotomy, where if an octopus's arm is severed, it can continue the action it was doing. Let's say, because in your book you were talking about an octopus had put one of its arms around, I think, a sea serpent or some kind of snake, and the animal was able to bite it off the octopus, and it continued to wrap around that animal and sort of was able to flee the situation, because it's like, instead of maybe it was continuing to think, it was just taking that action separately, which I found really fascinating. Unlike like a salamander that can lose its tail and then it's an escape, it's trying to not be eaten, it drops the tail and runs. But in this one, the arm is still acting out its initial sort of focus, which is just incredible to me.
Yeah, I mean, we know about, autotomy from, like you said, from a lizard or something like that would drop its tail, and the lizard can run away and the tail will flop around and occupy the predator, if you will.
Right.
And octopuses some species of octopuses have something similar. And I talk about that in Many Things Under a Rock. And but octopuses can lose their arms whether or not they have that autotomy ability to detach them. So some species have that kind of weak area where the arm is much more prone to break than other places. And some octopuses don't. They just have a muscular arm that can sometimes get bitten off by a predator. And the story I relate in the book is about a moray eel that has attacked an octopus.
Right.
And the octopus, in the course of its battle with the moray, has its arm ripped off. And the octopus, that gives the octopus an opportunity to make him an escape. So the octopus gets away, but not uninjured. And then what we see on the people who filmed it, they stayed with the moray. And so what we see is that arm with its suckers is still covering the eel's face.
Right.
It doesn't fall off. And of course, the eel's got part of it in its mouth, but the rest of it is not. It's still attached to the eel, and there's nothing to make it let go.
Right.
So it's continuing to be difficult to swallow, right? The eel eventually, we presume, eats it, but it does take the eel. The eel's got to cope with it first. And octopus suckers are like this. They stick on contact almost as the default, and they're sticking. The adhering has to be inhibited by the brain. So absent the brain, they're going to hold on.
Right.
Letting go requires sort of the brain to tell them, "Hey, you're done. Let go of this." It's a positive action. They don't let go by default.
Interesting.
Wow.
And so there's another moment in the book where I relate Heidi in her tank approaching this very light toy, a Mr. Potato Head toy, and she reaches out and she's curious about it, but she's very, very nervous about it. And she reaches out and sort of touches it and then jerks back. But in touching it, her suckers automatically adhere.
Right.
And so when she jerks back, she pulls it, and it's so light. If it had been heavy, she would have let go. But it's so light that when she lets go, it's already moving towards her.
Right.
Oh, man.
And then it looks very threatening to her because she was nervous about it to begin with. So she's got this
I knew
figure
she would
of
be
Mr. Potato Head. Yeah,
Right.
coming
Oh, my
after
God.
her.
Well, Well, that makes me think back to the eel. I mean, didn't that octopus also like have that moment to be able to get away? And then it used that inking that they do. So it creates like a whole illusion, like a wizard, a magician, and then poof, and then the eel kind of looks around and is like, oh, it's gone. So they're made up of many things that for as soft and squishy they are, they take fairly amazing care of themselves. It's pretty incredible. And so, yeah, they're fascinating. I feel like now we're starting to get a little bit into behavior. So this leads to my next question. And, I will say that I think humans often anthropomorphize animals, and I find myself doing this with the octopus, but some of their behavior that I read about in your book, I can relate to. And I think it's in their behavior where we see how highly intelligent they are and what emotional and cognitive beings they are. So talk to us about some of the most surprising or intriguing aspects of octopus behavior and what might specific behavior mean or propose.
Yeah, I think when you're dealing with these questions of behavior and the way we talk about octopus behavior right now, you really have to examine this question that you brought up of anthropomorphizing.
Yeah.
We've all been cautioned against it. I was told don't anthropomorphize when I was a graduate student in animal behavior. And the fact that people bring it up so often is because we've all been warned not to anthropomorphize. But what does that really mean? Well, what it means is don't attribute your own perspective on behavior or experience or what it's like to be something else without good reason.
Right.
It's not that we should never think that we have something in parallel with an animal. Imagine that. Imagine if anthropomorphizing was bad and it meant anytime we think we have something in common with an animal, we're wrong. I mean, that would imply that humans are not animals.
Right.
And that there is no common
right. That we're
there's
separate
nothing in common between animals and humans.
Absolutely.
And we know that's wrong.
Yes.
We know that octopuses and humans have the early parts of the history of life in common, right? Yes, we diverged a long time ago, probably as a flatworm, but a flatworm already had a nervous system. A flatworm already had hormones. A flatworm already had light sensing capabilities. A flatworm already had chemical sensing capabilities. A flatworm already had to coordinate its inner world, what its body needed, the state it was in, with the outer opportunities that the world offered it.
Right.
So we have all of that in common with octopuses. And then beyond that, we have evolved together in a common world dealing with common physics, right?
Yeah.
So, and common chemistry. So we need oxygen, just like octopuses need oxygen. And we live in a world full of other brains, just like octopuses live in a world full of other brains. And we have to learn to cope with other brains.
Love that. Yes, exactly.
So it would be stunningly weird and shockingly in need of explanation if we had nothing in common with octopuses.
Okay, I just need to clap a little bit and I feel very vindicated. This is great, and I believe this applies to a lot of other species. So thank you for just really flopping that down on the table. Just like, let's just put this out there. I love how you just wrapped that up so beautifully. So thank you for that.
It's commonly said that octopuses are the most alien in the intelligence that we have access to, that we've actually encountered the most alien intelligence on the planet. And I think that is probably true. At the same time, how alien is that?
Yeah.
Right. Yes, we can focus on the differences. But
Right.
many things under a rock tried to focus on the fact that as much as we have differences, there's a lot of exciting and very interesting commonalities. And the funny thing is, I think if we ever meet aliens from outer space that didn't evolve on planet Earth, we're going to find the same thing. Yes, there will be differences, but there will be stunning commonalities.
Exactly.
Because we all have to cope with the same physics.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. And what were you going to say, Jen?
I was just going to say it's a really good, it's a good metaphor just as a human being trying to relate to other human beings too. We can be stunningly different and still we have a lot in common. And it's kind of an interesting perspective to focus on that rather than the differences. And I think that as far as the anthropomorphizing goes, the only danger of I think, or a very typical danger in that is putting ourselves like at the center. It's like, well, you do that, so you must be like me, which makes me feel better about me, kind of thing. So it's like, if we're not doing that, if we're doing it to actually learn and support and care about, I think anthropomorphizing can be very positive because it's important to care about these other species that are out there. So that just struck me.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the world of ecology.
Yeah, that's great. I think I missed my calling.
Right?
I always think that, you know, if you're going to do anthropomorphizing right, you first need to learn a lot about the biology of the species that you're thinking about.
Right. Yeah.
And then you can begin to understand their sensory world and the ways in which we expect that to be similar or different to our own. Right. So, for example, octopuses don't see color. And so, you know, I'm sometimes been asked, well, how do they color match?
Right.
Right. And the answer is they don't. They don't color match. We just get fooled into thinking that they color match.
Wow.
Instead, what they do is they match pattern and they match darkness and lightness and they match texture. And then we're color-driven animals. We're primates. Primates have great sense of color. And we get completely fooled. So do the fish.
That's not what they're doing at all. Oh,
but the octopus has no sense of color, so it's obviously not color matching. It's doing something else.
That is incredible. That's astonishing to me that because we see so differently, we interpret it. Our brains are putting color in, we're seeing these colors, and the octopus is like, no, I'm doing all these other things. Like you were saying, like, you know, it's their body positioning and the texture and the color and the posturing, and they're just brilliant at fooling us.
Yeah, and if we were to talk to an octopus about color matching, you know, I'm confident the octopus would go, what do you mean? Color's not the point.
Right.
Color's not the thing. It's not color. You guys are so easy to fool, but you don't need color to fool you. I could do it 1,000 other ways. I don't need the trouble with color. What's that? That's not important.
Right. Amen, octopus. Say it again. Yes.
The other thing to realize is underwater, color behaves very differently than it does in the air.
Right. And is this where polarization comes into play?
Well, that does come into play, but water absorbs color. Particularly the red end of the spectrum, the low energy end of the spectrum. So as you get deeper in the ocean, there's actually less and less color to see at all.
Got it.
Right? Because there's no light that can be reflected off of the light that is there is only a single wavelength. You don't have the diversity of wavelengths to reflect back and show the diversity of color. So as you and I were to descend into the sea, we would not be able to see color anyway, but our brain still looks for it and still interprets it. And I've sometimes been surprised on a deep dive, you know, when you're 60, 70 feet down in murky water, you think something that you've never seen before is one color. And then you turn a bright flashlight on, you bring the extra wavelengths in that hadn't been present before. And you suddenly realize, oh, it's a different color. I thought it was gray, it's red. Or I thought it was green and it's red, right? And so you can be in the deep, your brain still thinks color is there, even though it isn't. Just like we still think octopuses color match, even though they don't. But what is there, to come back to where you were going, Kate, what is there is polarization, which we don't sense, but the octopuses do.
Right.
And so polarization has to do with the direction in which the wavelengths of light vibrate.
Okay.
It's something that our eyes are not sensitive to, but when light is reflected off of a flat surface like a water or a glass, the glare that we see is polarized light, and we're just seeing that it's too bright for our eyes. It's a hot spot, right? But that light is also polarized, and that's why polarizing sunglasses cut glare much more than they cut other light, because as long as the angle of polarization of the light differs from that of the sunglasses, a lot of that light, just the more polarized the light is, the more of it gets cut out.
Amazing.
So underwater, silvery surfaces like the sides of a fish stand out to an octopus because that light is polarized, and they're very sensitive to that. They can tell the difference.
That makes sense. So that makes me want to talk a little bit too. And I'm kind of combining, I feel like talking about behavior and this whole matching that they do. Can you talk to us about what passing cloud display is and when they display this? This to me is really fascinating as far as like, you know, what they're made of and what they can do and why they're doing it.
Yeah, passing cloud display is this sort of, it's this beautiful, beautiful display of color that passes along the skin of the octopus. So typically it will start out dark near the eyes.
Okay.
And then that darkness moves in a wave down onto the arms and then out the arms towards the tips. And while that's moving, a new dark spot may appear in the eyes again. And so you'll see nothing's actually moving. It's actually opening and closing of the chromatophores in a pattern. But it creates the appearance of waves of color passing down the octopus's arms.
Okay. Because it's literally, Jen, I don't know if you've seen this, but I was looking at it the other day, and it's like, you know, when clouds go over like a field, it literally is like that. Like it looks.
It moves very quickly.
Yeah, and it's like, but it looks like a cloud is passing over the octopus. Now, do you know why they do this?
Nobody knows why they do it, although everybody says they do.
Okay.
So there's no, by which I mean, that sounded rather superior. I didn't mean it that way. Or maybe I did. What I mean is, there's no published data that establishes an ecological function for this behavior. Okay? So I'm not convinced yet that the most common explanations are correct, because no one's ever put any data behind it. And it could be that they're correct. And if so, they're, you know, very astute people figured it out without any information. But they read more like lucky guesses.
Okay.
And you know, I don't have any data either. It's not like I know what this behavior is for.
Right.
But I struggle. The most common assumption is that somehow this hypnotizes the prey.
Okay.
And
can I just say it did hypnotize me?
It is hypnotizing.
Yeah.
But one of my questions is, if you're an animal who over evolutionary time is attacked by basically a light show swimming in the water above you, why would you not evolve some ability not to be hypnotized by this thing? Like, why would it hypnotize an animal to the point where the animal wouldn't run away? Now, the funny thing is, we do get hypnotized. So obviously that possibility exists.
Right.
We get startled, which doesn't seem very adaptive most of the time, and yet we still do that.
True.
but you would think it would be fairly easy to film hunting animals that were doing this. I've seen video of octopuses hunting while doing passing cloud display, but not in front of the prey. They were searching. So there wasn't even a prey present. And so that made me wonder, well, maybe the function of the behavior. Do you know what glimmer lines are?
No.
If you shine intense light, like sunlight, on water where the surface of the water is in motion,
Okay.
it creates these lines of focused intensity on the bottom, glimmer lines that move with the waves above them.
Right.
And wherever that light is intense, it's followed by a patch that's darker, bright, because the wave focuses the sunlight, and it creates an area of intense sunlight and an area of shadow. And these move very rapidly across the bottom at almost the same pace, it seems to me, as passing clouds move along octopuses. So I wonder if it's a camouflage behavior that's used when the octopus is moving to hide them in the glitter lines and make it harder for someone to pick them out.
Right.
But again, I don't have any data on that.
Well, I feel like we should ask Winnie the Pooh this, because didn't Winnie the Pooh just sing a song about being a little black rain cloud and then he went to get the honey? So I feel like this is what they're doing. They're saying, I'm just a little black rain cloud, and I'm going to sort of like move around. Don't worry about me.
Don't worry about me.
They want to eat yet. But I mean, I feel like I've solved it. You can say.
You may have. And I also feel like we could quote Winnie the Pooh here. Didn't he say something like, I like to believe two impossible things before breakfast?
Yes.
And so, that's how I feel about passing cloud. Whatever the explanation is, they pass through my brain, and I believe all of them.
Well, and
all of the explanations.
I think too, and just thinking about their behavior, I think some of their, again, like going back to my question about their, like the intelligence, right? Like you talk about how they use shell to disguise themselves, and they roll around in coconut shells if they find them to hide and maybe just have fun. Who knows? Because it looked really fun to roll around in a coconut shell. And then like using tools, right? Like whether they mean to throw things or not, they've been documented throwing sand in the direction of another octopus. And back to what you're saying before, some of this stuff has been filmed or observed so rarely that you don't have enough recurring data to actually say, this is why this is happening. But you talked about this one moment where an octopus left its cave or its little dwelling, its little den, its den, and came back with a sponge and then backed up into its den and put the sponge in its doorway. And I just think like those kind of things, do we need to see it more than a couple times to be like, it's closing its door? This is just what it is. And this is where I relate so much to octopuses. They do things that I would do if I were an octopus, I guess.
Right. If you had suckers all along your arms, why wouldn't you?
Yeah.
Well, and that was a fascinating instance because it's quite common that an octopus will hold a shell, in front of it, just hold on to it. And as a result, it blocks the entrance to their den. But the shell is right there. It's part of the den anyway, right? So it's just like they just picked up the nearest thing. Could be an easy minimalist interpretation of what's going on.
Right.
What was interesting about the sponge, what drew Peter Guthrie Smith's attention to that and mine, was that the octopus got up from its den, went out and got this thing, and then brought it back. And it was obviously a choice of some sort, right? And so it's evidence for this idea of intentionality, a plan. If I drag that back, it'll cover this hole nicely. Things will be situated.
That's right. Well, and that makes me think about, and you and I had talked a bit about this when we last chatted, is you filmed what I think everyone agrees, possibly, that your octopus in your tank, Heidi, dreaming.
Yeah, to be clear, I get a lot of credit for that, but it really was me talking. Someone else had filmed it. The filming was done, Ernie Kovacs
Okay.
did the filming. And I was actually not even present. He wanted to use the house for a while in order to see what was going on when all was quiet. And so
Okay.
he was quiet as a mouse, and he set everything up, and he waited until Heidi was asleep, and
Okay.
and then he caught that. And so by the time I was brought into this scene, the film had already been captured. And
Okay.
it had already been edited and cut down, and just the highlights. And the director was very careful to make sure I didn't know what was coming. To just say, I want to show you some film, and I want you to talk about it as you see it. And and so what made that probably works cinematically was that they were getting these sort of speculative comments, and I kind of knew what they were doing, trying to get me out on a limb somewhere where I would do something surprising or whatever, but it was a beautiful bit of film. And if you listen carefully to the narrative, I knew that I was being recorded, and I'm hedging my bets. I don't know if this was dreaming, but if it were, right. And the thing is, that led me and I think influenced others who are already looking at sleep and thinking about dreaming. It led us to think about dreaming a little more than we had until that point.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I ended up writing about the possibility of accessing octopus dreams by changes in their skin pattern.
Yeah, it was incredible video too.
It's beautiful video. It's stunning video. It's perfectly lit. The behavior is amazing and gorgeous to watch.
Yeah.
It's brilliant video. And then, unbeknownst to me, there was another author writing. I called the paper that I worked on was with co-authors was called "Do Animals Dream?"
Okay.
Just a month or two after my paper came out, a book came out, and the book was called "When Animals Dream."
Okay.
And that the author there is making a philosophical, primarily a scientific, philosophical, and ethical argument that we already know animals dream, and we've lost the ability. We have lost the position of being surprised by this anymore.
Yes,
right? So much evidence is in. It's so clear that we shouldn't be questioning this anymore.
Yeah. No.
And if animals dream, then they have consciousness.
Right. And that's where we'll end for that, just because that's a whole other ball of wax. But it's what will lead to more research and the questions that you can ask, I think. And you had said at one point when we talked last that one of the things about the octopus is that it makes ecology ask new questions. So, David, this is our last question, and we ask all our guests this question. Overall, why do you think this conversation about the secret world of octopuses is an important one to have? And what new awarenesses and connections can we have and make?
That's a question I've been asked before. It comes in different veins, but why should we care? And I have to say, almost all of these conversations begin with people pointing out how popular octopuses are and how many different places they show up in and how much lore there is. And we started this conversation the same way, talking about octopuses in horror movies, talking about octopuses in metaphor. And, if octopuses are that central to the way that we think, I feel like we should know something about the actual animal. Otherwise, what we say about octopus is nothing more than self-reflective.
Yes.
It's actually about us.
Right.
And we can't learn or persuade anyone using just what we know about ourselves. It's too self-centered. It puts us too much in the middle. So if we want to talk about octopuses as a metaphor of alienness, of differentness, of in indigenous knowledge, the octopus is a metaphor for the ways that knowledge connects to all things, right? That it really represents, it's an animal that represents expertise and the extent in which our knowledge helps us operate in the world in desirable ways. But if we want to do that, we can't have that conversation and not actually know the octopus. And so many things under a rock, and this conversation today, my goal is that we try to see the octopus as it actually is. Yes. Not as an alien, not as a human, not as a smart animal, but as an octopus.
Yes.
And that's a complicated thing. There's a lot of nuance in there. It's not black and white.
Right.
And so that's why I think it's an important conversation to have.
Well, and I agree. And it's why we wanted to talk to you about this incredible species. And, we can be fascinated by them, but I love what you're saying. If we're going to throw them around and, all of these different, environments, whether it be a terrible movie I like to watch about big stupid sharks or whatever else it might be, poetry from way back when, you're so right. Let's actually know what we're talking about. Let's have like real sort of science and knowledge behind the lore and the myth and all of that. And I love what you said. That's a great way to come to this, especially with something that people think, oh, the octopus is gross and slimy, or they're super alien. And it's actually, I feel like this is where, with many species, when we just take the time, or someone like you does, and we get to read your book and talk to you, we're very lucky that you get to know the specific species, and then it becomes familiar instead of alien. And I think that's so much of what our podcast is about. So thank you so much for speaking with us today. We appreciate your time and effort here. I very much enjoyed your book, and we will put links to your book, and we'll also put a link to a video. Maybe you can send me one you think is the best one of the passing cloud display, because it's really fascinating. So David, thank you so much for your work and uncovering some of the mysteries, pulling like what's under the rock here, and really looking at an exceptionally extraordinary, beautiful animal. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for taking the time to speak with me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to The Takeaway. Just on the outset, thanks so much to David for an amazing conversation about an incredible animal that I've just kind of more and more fallen in love with. I just find them just, I don't know, for as exotic and as everything he was, just saying, like, I just feel like there's so much to relate about them. And I loved it. I think you did too, when we brought up anthropomorphizing animals, specifically them. And he was like, you can do this. Like, he was like, emphatically, yes, we can. I mean,
it was very interesting. I've never heard such a positive spin on it before.
He was just like, can we please be done with that? But he also wasn't. And I think like his quote was that we have, quote, early parts of the history of life in common, right? And I think that is something that is a little unique to octopuses for sure. Not every species we have that on the planet. And I think like there was that divergent, but at the very, very early beginning, we do have a lot in common, like we do lots of other animals. And I think that for me, I'm not saying I believe in anecdotal science. And he talked about that, right? He was like, we can't use anecdotal science as science. And yet the things we observe, and there's a lot more to observe.
Right.
But, I just feel like, especially when we were talking about when that one octopus went out of her den and grabbed a spongy thing and then back to her den, and she was cleaning out her den. And then
I know. That's just that. And I guess it feels so endearing and surprising because they, like with an ape or a chimpanzee or whatever, they look kind of like us. Like an octopus is just this, looks more like an alien or like a thing of somebody would conjure up in their brain than something that we can relate to, yet they're doing things that are relatable. So it's like, wow, there's something extra cool about that. Yeah,
I totally agree. And I think like in his book, which I really urge people to get, Many Things Under a Rock, The Mysteries of Octopuses, I really think I just think it's so important to sort of dive into it in this, and there's so many relatable anecdotes, yes, but then there also is a lot of science about what he's talking about. And like you're saying, like when these octopuses are cleaning out their clays, and then like there's definitely people have seen them throw things at each other. I mean, there's just things that are like, just there's humor there, and I don't think we have even really, well, maybe he scratched the surface of how intelligent they are and how dynamic they are. But I think too, when you see an octopus going out, retrieving a sponge, backing into their den, and then putting the sponge into the hole there, I don't know what else you need to, that just seems like, okay. Yeah. Maybe
it seems like it's thinking. It's not just doing, it's not an instinct. It's like making decisions.
Making decisions, and isn't part of like intelligence, right? The ability to decide. And I think, and I just love it because I think that also, I think you were saying too at one point, like if we relate to them, we want to understand them, and then we love them, and we want to protect and support them. And I think that's really the most important thing about that part of the conversation, is just really knowing that things can be wildly different than we are, and yet there's always something to relate to, and it just hooks us into empathy and caring, right? And just sort of thinking about the other, thinking about something and someone other than us, and just being so not so anthropocentral. Is that the right word? But I mean, I just love that. I really did. So please check out Dr. Scheel's book. And again, thanks so much for David for his time and work and passion for these amazing animals. There's just so much more to learn, and just amazing stories. And you can find his book, wherever you get books, like Amazon. And I think it's also on Audible. I actually bought the book, but I also listened to it through Audible. That was really fun. And you can learn more about his work at Alaska Pacific University's website, alaskapacific.edu. And then, as normal, for show notes and guest links, go to our website, kindredpodcast.co, where you can also sign up for our newsletter. Again, support us through subscribing to Kindred Podcast and buying me a coffee. And then for sure, follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Kindred Pod. So I, for one, cannot wait now to go back to Bonaire, an amazing dive island, and look out for the elusive and illustrious octopus. So peace, everyone. Lots of love.
Bye.
Kindred is hosted by me and my sister Jen, produced by Kat Gaddy and myself, sound production and editing by Dan Cooper, original music by Ellie Grace, and our Kindred artwork was created by Lindsay Coffin. Please follow, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts, and feel free to contact us through our website at kindredpodcast.co, where you can also find details about Kindred Plus, our subscription service, as well as links to our social media accounts and show notes.